GM everyone, and welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the pretty volatile crypto market, the pre-sale market, not so much the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today. We have FOMC meeting is ending with the expected 25 bips rate cut, but BTC did drop after that, and we are, at least in the crypto world, down on the day as the Fed is hawkish. Phunky is going to get into the details around that. OpenAI is preparing for a $1 trillion IPO. Bit more. We'll also talk on some of the earnings that came out from tech stocks and see how that is fitting in with that overall narrative. And MegaETH ICO surpasses $1.2 billion in deposits, seeking an allocation for the $50 million raise at $1 billion FTV. Swizzy, good friend of the show, good friend of mine, put together a bit of a calculation math on how to expect or what allocations to expect. We're going to go through that as well. I also saw that we didn't have sound in the spaces for a bit, but that should be fine now. Yes, looks good from what I can tell. Sorry for that. We're almost ready to get into it. Got Phunky with me as a co-host on the show. But before we do that, just to remind our friends that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is extremely risky. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment at any time. With that out of the way, Phunky, how are you doing on this Thursday?
I am doing great. Thank you so much, my friend. Always a great day when I get to co-host the Modern Market Show with you. Of course, because I know people were upset. For those who are watching the live stream, we now have the gold chain just positioned off in the background along with the funky sign. So like, you know, it's still there. It's lurking. The BBE will always be with you all. But yeah, great day. And one thing I wanted to just give a shout out to, yesterday I watched The Incentive Layer, which is a new documentary about Bittensor. People know I'm a big Bittensor fan, really enjoy the ecosystem. And so if you haven't had the chance to watch that, in fact, I dropped it to B check this morning underneath the Roundup. I would highly recommend anybody. It's just shy of an hour. If you can find an hour and you want to know and understand Bittensor, what makes this community unique, they kind of came together to make this documentary, and it was really, really quite good. So yeah, I'm kind of still sailing off the highs of that yesterday, and looking forward to today's show.
Nice. Any key takeaways from that documentary?
I just think that it does a very good job of giving people a good introduction to who some of the key players are in the industry. In fact, I texted the opening frame was a gentleman named Jose Rios. And I think I've spoken on the show before that my middle brother, Brad, worked at Intel for 21 years. And he was made all the way up to a corporate vice president, which is one of the top dogs in the company. And he worked with Jose for probably 15 or 16 of those 21 years. And so he introduced me to Jose some years ago, and then now he has a project called BT Labs. So he opened up the documentary. I texted him after, so now we're ending up going to have a chat because we haven't talked in a few months. But it kind of gives you an introduction to who some of the key players are. You see a lot from Barry Silbert, who of course now has, you know, famously was Grayscale. He's now the CEO of Yuma Group, which is sort of the group that's leading the investment and the Tau Trust that's being built as a Grayscale product. You see other core people like Const, was one of the original developers. It kind of gives you all the overview of Bittensor, how it got started, because this is much like Bitcoin, right? There was no VC sale. There was no pre-mine. There was nothing like that. It was a network that was bootstrapped. It uses a lot of the same sort of economics or tokenomics, the same incentives of Bitcoin. But instead of just now trying to harness energy like Bitcoin does, what really the incentive layer is showing is that it's harnessing intelligence across the world through the internet, because you have miners that are looking for, you know, the most efficient ways to solve problems, and then the validators are checking to make sure that knowledge is correct. And so a lot of different use cases, 128 subnets, but it's a really great overview. If you don't know anything about Bittensor, it's really worth watching. And fun fact, always have to showcase this, it is built on Polkadot tech, right? Like they use the substrate programming, which it's an independent chain. It's not part of the Polkadot network, but it does use sort of that base layer because it is so composable and secure and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a really great job done on the documentary overall.
Love it. Yeah. I'm definitely going to watch that. I feel like I am lacking in terms of Bittensor education. I do have Tau. I am a bit familiar with some of the subnets, but I've also seen the timeline start to discuss that more and more and have this sort of discussion whether the alpha lies in finding the right subnet, so to speak, or is just buying the Tau token enough. And I definitely need to catch up on that side of things. So I will watch that documentary. Just say it once more. Where it is? Did you say Netflix or?
It's on YouTube, but it's theincentivelawyer.com. There's a dedicated website to it. You can watch it there. You can watch it on YouTube. You can download it. And I'm trying to remember the name of it's one of the Bittensor community. I want to say it's Everett. I can find the account and I'll drop the link for people who are interested. But yeah, just theincentivelawyer.com is the website.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you for that update. And we are almost ready to get into the price action. But before we do that, just a shout out to our partner, Beezie. This show is sponsored by Beezie, the on-chain claw machine, innovating how collectors chase the next grail. Beezie lets you pull everything from PSA grade Charizards to Labubu figures, Travis Scott Jordans, and sealed products, all securely vaulted with brings tokenized on-chain and shipped worldwide. Whether you're after rare Pokemon slabs or battling your way up the leaderboard to farm and airdrop through pulls, swaps, and trades, Beezie makes collecting on-chain fun. We'll also do a giveaway towards the end of the show for the new $250 claw machine, which they just launched yesterday. And we will distribute that, or we'll basically have a wheel of names for that with the top 3 players, gamblers, enjoyers, collectors, however you want to call them, who signed up using our affiliate link. So definitely stay tuned for that. But let's get into the price action now, starting with the majors. As usual, let me just adjust my window size a bit because this looks horrible. There we go. BTC, as we said it at the top of the show, is down on the day, down 2.5% at 110K. ETH is down 2.5% as well, 3.9K. Both tokens did go lower, had a bit of a rebound there, but still down on the day. XRP down 3.5%, $2.50. Solana holding up well, down only 1%, $192 for Solana. Hyperliquid, once again, moving against the trend, not impressed by the dump, up another 2%, $48.5, still up 24% on the week. And Sui is down 0.7% on the day, $2.40. Moving on to the meme coin side of things, we have some mixed price action there, but predominantly it is a red day for memes. Doge is down 3%, SHIB is down 3% as well, Pepe is down almost 4%. Trump is down 4%, but obviously still up 40% on the week, whereas most of the other things are down a bit or flat on the week. Bonk down 4%, SPX down 7%, Dogwhip Hat, Fartcoin. Most of these things are down 3% on the day. There's a couple of exceptions to that. Most notable one being Rect. Rect is up 40% on the week and up 23% on the day. Just having a quick laugh because English in the YouTube comments is saying that Phunky is the Unk version of bread, looking all jacked and shit. I like that. Like that comparison a lot. Good job on making me laugh while trying to go through the price action. Moving on to the main headlines, I said it at the top of the show. Fed did cut rates by 25 bips, but BTC did dump, as Paul said that it's not a certainty that there's going to be another rate cut. It's a bit more info on that, so Phunky will break that down for us. OpenAI, on the other hand, is preparing for a $1 trillion IPO, and MegaETH has seen an increase in the inflows for the ICO, surpassing 1.2 bill. We're going to break that down as well. In terms of some other notable price action, we have Zcash being up another 9%, $358 there. Plasma down 13% on the day to 31 cents. And as I already said, Rect up 24% to 248 mil. In terms of some notable sales, Sam Spratt Play Edition sold for 3.5 ETH, and an Azuki Elemental, having that up on screen after saying how much they were down for the floor ones at 0.1 ETH yesterday. someone did spend 10 ETH on this pretty beautiful lightning strike elemental, checking in with the rest of the NFTs to see what's going on there. It is actually a green day for NFTs. Pudgy is up 2%, but still under a 7, or just a touch under 7 ETH floor. Bored Apes up 4%, 6.6 ETH floor there. Azuki is up 4%, 1.07 ETH floor. So it seems to be a bit of a rebound, anywhere between 3 and 7% for the major collections, but most of them are, or all of them are, still down on the week quite significantly. Moving on to the Web3 roundup to get you the rest of the news from around the space, we have Consensys being the parent company of Metamask is planning to go public. ETH announcing a new website specifically for institutions. 21 shares filing for a hyperliquid ETF. MasterCard acquiring crypto and stablecoin infrastructure startup Zero Hash for around $2 billion. In terms of some more news, Blockworks announces a shutdown of their newsroom, and a bit of a longer post going out on what they are focusing on, that they see themselves more now as a software and data company. Beezie announcing the Pokemon Gold Claw being now live. Again, we're going to have a giveaway for that at the end of the show. And Monad did roll out the second day of Mon rewards yesterday. Generally, it appeared that the rewards were lower for most people than on day one. And we have the final day today. And in the Modern Market Telegram, I also have a nice side bet with Atari God on that. I think that this day, the final day, will have a higher, definitely a higher claim in there. Atari thinks the best day was day number 1. So we will see how that will play out in the afternoon. But with that being said, Phunky, any thoughts on a specific headline from the Web3 roundup or anything else that's standing out to you?
Well, a couple things. One, I think you're going to win that bet because the intern said something like, we're going to find out that it really is community last, but had an image that showed like a giant Mon, token. So I think you are in good standing there. People want the gold chain, man. Look at the comments. People want the gold chain. But I'll thank you for the love English. And, it's funny because now I'm thinking with the handles marketplace out, because I just asked for Phunky, just plain Phunky. And of course, I'm not a huge account, so then just instantly give it to me like they did with ICO Beast and some of these others. But I used to, so now I'm thinking maybe Jacked Unk. Maybe that should be the new handle, Jacked Unk, because one of my early AOL screen names was I'm So Jacked. When I used to be a tremendous gym rat, used to lift 6 days a week and was much bigger than I even am now. I mean, back then I was like 215 when I first met my wife, and I'm only like 30 pounds less than I'm like 185. So, but thanks for the kind words, English. But no, nothing immediately jumps out. Looking forward to getting into some of these headlines, because I think that the stuff's going to be really important, especially the way the market reacted. And we were talking about it in the Modern Market chat yesterday. And you've been around a long time like me. Yesterday was some of the most schizo price action I'd ever seen in a very short period of time. Like, we're up, we're down, and shout out Jatoshi. He's like, we're still back. We're not. Like it was all over the place. So the Fed meeting, I think, had a huge impact on that.
Yeah, that was a Bitcoin chart yesterday. Started good, showing down screen. They started very, very nicely with BTC at 113K. We did go down to 109K multiple times. We even got down almost all the way down to 108K. Did recover once to 111.50K, and then did slide down for a final time under $110,000. As you said, quite a lot of volatility. We're going to get into that. But before we do that, another thing that stood out to me was the because we'll talk a bit of we'll talk IPOs a bit today, and was Consensys announcing their IPO with JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs leading that. And I wonder, what does that mean for some of the other things which they are building? What does it mean for Linnea? What does it mean for Sharplink? Obviously, Joseph Lubin having a Sharplink to manage as well, and for their on-chain yield strategies. And what does that mean for the MetaMask airdrop and token, because now it kind of makes me think that, if you have a company to IPO, then this is the number one priority, and make sure that this is doing well. Then launching your token for a wallet is not really the thing that you would be focused on too much under those circumstances. It kind of makes me a bit more bearish on the MetaMask token, but makes me interested in the Consensys IPO. I don't know. Am I being too pessimistic here, or what are you thinking?
No, I mean, I think it shows that TradFi is here to stay, right? Like, this is a theme that we've been talking about for the last year, especially since Trump got elected, right? I mean, they're continuing sort of creep, if you will, of TradFi into our industry should surprise no one. And I think that it would make a ton of sense to take a legacy company like Consensys that has been around for 10 years or whatever it's been, and to expedite that IPO, because there's tons of money to be made, and it's a way, way, way bigger market to do it as an equity in a TradFi environment compared to just doing a token drop. And look, at the end of the day, we saw something very similar with Coin. So Coinbase IPO'd. I mean, how many times did we hear them swear up and down that there will never be a base token? And here we are on the verge of a base token, and people speculating about what the supply is going to be, how much of it is going to be airdropped to the community. So in my mind, it would make a lot of sense to IPO the company, right? Have the TradFi bros all eat and get in early and do what they're going to do in terms of typical IPOs and who's going to be offered to. And, they could do an expedited roadshow and everything else to make sure that it meets all. If they want it, they will get it cleared very quickly, right? They'll get underwriters lined up to go through all the due diligence and so on and so forth. And then why not do the token after? I mean, we've already waited for the MetaMask token literally for years, and I don't even think it's going to be a big airdrop. Think about how many people are MetaMask users. It was the de facto standard of our industry as an EVM wallet for the better part of 8 years or thereabouts, right? Since it launched, to when you started having Rainbow and Rabby and some of these other really competitors kind of slowly creep into the EVM game. And granted, the Polkadot wallets, the Cosmos wallets, they all followed suit where they have an EVM offering. But I think the MetaMask airdrop, whenever it comes, is going to be much ado about nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I like the thinking. I like the thinking to basically say that in this market, under these regulations, and obviously with having Goldman and JP being very experienced with IPOing companies, you can probably expedite that process and be pretty quick about that. I also see Oxy with his hand up, so I want to go to you, and then we're going to move into the first headline.
Yeah, thank you. I think this, as funny as it sounds, this might be like the first instance of a token with a publicly traded company with publicly traded shares, and it might end up being the standard, as crazy as that sounds. Because something that I've always grappled with is how do you explain to boomer shareholders of holding JP Morgan or or holding Consensys or whatever the Kai is, get comfortable with the idea oh yeah, there's a token as well that people hold. How does that reflect my shares? How is that tied into anything that I own? Does that mean they own something? It's explaining or bridging that gap between publicly traded shares and tokens. So I don't know, I think it's really interesting. It'd be really cool if a publicly traded company does issue a token, because I think there's so many different companies in this space that could and will go public, that will have tokens. So this might be a turning point for the industry, to be honest.
Yeah, I like that. You know what I'd also like? I would like to see a future where a lot of stock and equity trading is happening on chain, or many of the TradFi people also start to have wallets and Web3 access, so that you could actually airdrop whatever token it is to shareholders, and have shareholders get a dividend, sort of a dividend kind or dividend-like payment in form of a token airdrop. Obviously, there would be KYC requirements for that, and you can't do that anonymously. But I think that would be interesting to see that play out, and see even having the regulatory framework to be able to do that, which I think it will take someone to actually try doing it first and see how that plays out. and then establish a standard process, but probably see some of those things over the next couple of years. Phunky, any final reflections, or shall we keep it moving?
No, we can keep it moving.
All right, let's do that. Let's get into the first headline. As we said, the Fed did cut interest rate by 25 bips. Market is a bit shaky. We're going to cover this part. That's the one that you're going to take, Phunky. And then what I also want to do is, because I think the other reason why we're seeing a bit of volatility is the actually good news coming out of China from President Trump's meeting with President Xi and some of the things that have been announced there. But first things first, and going to you, what do we need to know from the FOMC yesterday?
Yeah, so a lot of things to unpack from that FOMC meeting. I think the headline, of course, is that they cut 25 basis points, which everybody expected. What made the market nervous, however, is the fact that they said, or Jerome said, that another rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion. So everybody was expecting rate cuts both immediately to happen, of course, this month, and then they were expecting another rate cut to happen in December. Because he said those words, that made the market very nervous. Now, I think people just took that as the headline, as, oh my gosh, they're not going to cut rates. However, if you really dug into, I didn't watch the meeting, but I just read all of the notes this morning about some of the highlights. If you really dig into the data, there's a lot more to unpack there and reasons why people should still be sort of bullish. And you kind of saw it recover a little bit, the market in after some of the comments ended toward the end of the day. And that probably has a lot to do with a couple of key pieces. For one, and this actually goes back to yesterday's conversation on the show, they talked about the softening labor market. We've seen all of these layoffs roll in. The big headline grabbing one, I think, was Amazon with 30,000. And there were others that kind of tailed off as low as 1,000. But he did specifically mention how AI is creating some of this impact, right? And this is something that we had talked about yesterday on the show, is that they don't want to outright say it, but now the Fed's even outright saying that the AI and the efficiencies that it's creating is allowing for some of these layoffs. When you look at earnings and you look at, in fact, just economic growth, he also said that this was actually, they were surprised by the upward trajectory of economic growth over the last quarter. Now, everything that I'm saying here, and also I probably should put a little asterisk right now on it, is that he said, however, it's based on all the data that they have access to, because of course, with the government shutdown, now being the second longest government shutdown ever, that they don't have up to the minute granular data for some of these things. So that's important. That's something you need to keep in mind. But based on the data they could review, the economic growth was strong and the layoffs were softening, but it wasn't like a huge cause for concern. There was disagreement among the committee. It was a 10-2 vote to reduce the rates, with one person dissenting and actually wanting a stronger rate cut, and then one saying no rate cut whatsoever. Now, looking forward to December, and I think this is what got buried, and this is probably the most important piece in the news yesterday, was that he said, assuming these conditions hold, there will be a rate cut in December. So, I think that got lost in the noise. People just like, oh my gosh, no rate cut in December. And they just immediately became bearish, when the reality is two things that we're going to assume. One, hopefully the government will be open by then. And then if that's going to happen, we should see liquidity increasing because of some other things that are going to happen beyond just like rates being cut. Two, we'll get better access to that better data, and then hopefully they'll have a more informed decision to make about reducing the rates again in December, which people still in the majority expect. So I think that it's likely to happen again, assuming that these numbers hold. The other piece in this too was that the Bank of Japan held rates steady, and people took that as a bearish thing, right? Because if you remember, I think it was last August when the JPY USD carry trade unwound because of them raising rates. Now, they're not raising rates, they're not cutting rates, they're just holding them still, but that's good enough, I think. And then, of course, on the end of all of this news, you had, and shout out Lal McShiz, he did a great job with like his 2-cent summary in the Modern Market Chat. Basically, like the Bank of Japan basically said like, we're going to hold steady. That was bearish. And then all of a sudden, Trump shakes hands with Xi, and it's like, okay, bullish. And that kind of balanced it out. So, I think that was good to see that there was some kind of agreement set, because I think that was even the bigger looming concern, is that people were freaking out about what, was going to happen between the US and China. But now that seems to be, over and done with, I think we're going to be on the right trajectory. But I think people were just too bearish when they just heard, oh, there's not going to be a rate cut, or there's a potential for there not to be a rate cut in December. But that kind of gives you the whole picture.
Awesome summary. Super helpful to put these things into context. Maybe also adding to that JPOW did also say that while they do not have access to all of the data, they are pretty confident that if there's like any major change, that they would notice that, even or despite the government shutdown. Which then also, if you look at poly market, that picture isn't too dramatic. Let me get it up on screen. So what we're looking at is the market for the Fed decision in December, which already has $7.6 million in volume. So it's not a small market by any means. And it did peak at a 90% chance 2 days ago that we're going to see a 25 pips rate cut in December. And at the time, a 4.5 chance to see 50 pips rate cut. So basically 95% chance that we're going to see a rate cut. And then it did go down to 70%, which is basically the levels where it was roughly at the start of October, so a month ago. So it is a bit of a decrease. It's down 20% from the high, but it's not as if the majority of the market would think that we're not going to see a rate cut coming in December. And just to also touch on maybe equities quickly around the world. So we said it on the US side of things that the S&P 500 was pretty flat. Asian shares did close mostly mixed. South Korea was a bit higher. Japan was, even after all of the bearish outlook, which you had mentioned, basically flat as well. Europe initially did fall. Germany was then up on some of the GDP data, as well as some of the German companies' earnings data. And what also happened, an index that we didn't touch on in quite a while, let me get it up on screen as well, is the DXY, the dollar index against a basket of other currencies. And DXY actually has been recovering over the last month. It's up 1.37%. It's also up 0.1% yesterday, which again, with this index is a lot. It doesn't move a lot. It moved 5.8% over the last 5 years. So saying that it's up 1% on a month is actually a good month for the dollar index. So it seems like that the dollar is recovering a bit here and is not disliking the news which we've seen yesterday. Phunky, coming back to you. A, any final reflections on that? B, anything that you're thinking of from a portfolio perspective, anything where you are adjusting, or it's just basically everything is staying the same?
No, I'm glad you brought up the DXY, because I did not realize that it had moved. And to give people some context for how that is a massive move in a month, right? Like I remember when we announced that we were going to print a bunch of money back in 2020, I was buying puts in my equities account on the DXY. And my mentor, who was teaching me how to trade, she's like, why are you doing that? Like, the dollar takes forever to get down there. You'd be better off buying puts at a higher strike and whatnot. So it is a glacial pace typically when it comes to the dollar movement. But why I'm encouraged by this is for the dollar to have rallied this much in such a short period of time. And Bitcoin is still basically at 110, I think is a tremendous sign of strength. So, you think about how these two are inversely correlated. For all the bad news that, or bad news that people think that they've seen lately, and for Bitcoin still to be kind of hanging out at 110, I think, I think of something that I often learned, a mantra back when in the last run, the longer the base, the higher into space, right? So like when you have this basing pattern that's just chopped for a long time, typically it does lead to a significant movement and, to the upside when that volatility expands. And so this, I think, bodes well for the next leg up overall.
Yeah, like the take, very much agree with that as well. As I said, I also want to get into, because we touched on it, or we teased it a bit, onto the China situation between Trump and Xi to see what has been coming out of that meeting. And that is mostly positive. Many media analysts are concluding that both Trump and Xi secured what they needed domestically out of their meeting. We said that on the show, that both parties need to save face. Both of them need to be able to record that as a win. And it seems that exactly this is happening. To give some more detail on that, coming via the Kobesi letter, Trump announces China tariff reductions after a quote-unquote amazing meeting with President Xi. Trump specifically said, like, if he had to rate the meeting on a scale from 1 to 10, it's a 12. And it includes reduced fentanyl tariffs to 10% effective immediately. Overall tariffs on China reduced from 57 to 47%. China to discuss chip restrictions with NVIDIA. Again, this is going to be a very important one, especially as we covered that NVIDIA a bit quite extensively on the show. And the NVIDIA stock, unsurprisingly, did like that, up another percent on the day, is now the first $5 trillion company ever in human history, which is just crazy to think that one company is way bigger than the entire crypto market cap. But we touched on some of the things that NVIDIA is planning yesterday. No more obstacles on rare earths. Again, we covered that on the show as well, that China is one of the main sources for rare earths, as well as processing of rare earths, which is so important for the entire AI industry, for all semiconductors. And China and the US to also collaborate on Ukraine. What we also had yesterday, and we said that this will come throughout the week, is some of the earnings data from the Mag 7, the Magnificent 7, the tech companies in the States, and they're a bit mixed. We have, for example, Meta missing Q3 earnings, and that is something that the market reacted to quite sensitively. Meta was down 10% a day from 755 to 689. And it's probably not too surprising that this move is so strong because, and you also said that multiple times in the show, Phunky, we have seen now quarter after quarter after quarter of companies exceeding their earnings, hitting at least their goals. So it has become a bit rare for some of the big ones to miss expectations, and the market is reacting with more volatility to that. On the other hand, a complete opposite chart is Google officially posting its first quarter where it surpassed $100 billion in quarterly revenue. Got to scroll down to see the entire green candle, being up 7% on the day after these strong earnings in Q3. And I feel like that is maybe the reason, as you said at the start of the show, that this has been one of the crazier trading days for BTC, that we had so many mixed news coming out the same day. We had rate cut, we had initially hawkish outlook, which if you digest it further, still means that if things remain the same, we're gonna be very likely to see another rate cut. We had this staccato of news coming out of China from Trump's meeting with Xi, and then we had a bit of mixed earnings data on the Nasdaq side of things, which obviously is correlated with crypto prices, and the market was basically reacting to all of these things as they came out. Phunky, any thoughts on that from your perspective?
I just gotta say, I didn't think I'd ever see God candles in equities the way that you just showed them on screen. So for those who aren't watching, the candles that he had on screen were quite ludicrous, in both directions. In the case of Meta with red, and in the case of Google with green. And Aaron and I were talking about this yesterday because I had, been doing a lot of covered calls, and we sold off some of our NVIDIA position because it was taking up such a huge part of portfolio in her Roth IRA. And, and I was saying, man, I can't believe those 300 shares were called away, back when it was like 150 or whatever. And granted, much of that was repositioned in Tesla at very good prices on the dump, which has basically since doubled. So, I think that what I like is just how we continue to have conversations around more of the TradFi opportunities that exist out there, right? And you guys talking about doing more with options and so on and so forth. I mean, I hold Google, for instance. I no longer hold Meta. So, very happy to see that. So that put a huge smile on my face and just kind of laughing at the candle. But I think that shouldn't surprise anybody, right? Like, we're going to continue to see Mag 7 outperform. Think about what we talked about on the show the other day about how there's such a small percentage of the entire equities market produce the overabundance of wealth and just value creation. And I think you're only going to continue to see that concentration, especially in the tech sector, because our world is being reshaped by it, right? I mean, people think about Meta and they think Facebook, right? And I don't have them on right now because I typically only wear them when I'm out, but like Meta Ray-Bans are, the Meta AI. And so like when I'm using those glasses, I'm talking to Meta, I'm like, hey, Meta, blah, 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 blah. And I get it to do stuff. So like as an AI platform, and, that's probably another reason that people are, you look at an earnings miss. And I personally think that sometimes the volatility of prices is a bit ridiculous on an earnings miss, right? Like, because Wall Street effectively foists these expectations onto these companies. And even if they miss by a tiny bit, you get these crazy reactions. And so, something we talked about on the show previously is that, Trump is basically saying, why don't let these companies, instead of quarterly earnings, having like a semi-annual earnings report, because that gives them more time to build runway. Like, it is such short-term thinking when you have quarterly earnings, and you have to there's such a strong expectation for the leadership team to make whatever their projections are, or to not even meet them, but to basically exceed them. So, it's not surprising to see these kinds of reactions. And I just feel like, and I saw yesterday, Michael Burry, the famous Big Short guy, like somebody had just quote tweeted his thing where he basically said sell back in 23. And there's been X amount of all-time highs hit by the S&P. It's up 71% since he made that call. So, it's just, I think this trend is going to continue for the foreseeable future. And, don't buck the trend at the end of the day.
Yeah, long term, very much agree with that, right? Time in the market beats timing the market. Because you mentioned Tesla, wanted to pick your brain on something. So we had the discussion on the show yesterday where B was saying that for every dollar that he's getting of private exposure in robotics, whether that's through private sales, investments, other tokens that he might find interesting and buy, he also wants to put $1 into Tesla. What did you make of that?
I think you should put $10. Honestly, because it's a much larger, $1 and $1 is not going to be equal, right? Because when you think about the valuation of Tesla and where it is, it was actually you, Ledge. So shout out to you for making the call about Tesla, and not so much about the vehicles, but the robotics arm, right? With Optimus and all these other things, because you had said something on the show, I don't know, like a year ago when you first started talking about this. And that was the point. I had a little bit of Tesla exposure, but it was when we sold off the NVIDIA that my main target was acquiring more Tesla. And what I did, especially when the tariffs scare happened back in the spring, was set laddered limit orders to buy larger and larger chunks as the price dipped. The only one that we didn't fill was $200, which would have been an absolute steal in retrospect to maybe that was a little greedy on my part to put a $200 price tag. But I feel like that is the key piece when it comes to Tesla, because the robotics thing. Just look at the excitement over Neo. I mean, how many times yesterday did you say you want one of these Neo bots, right? So, I think that there's something to be said. Look at how the robotics sector in our industry kind of performed just on the release of the information about Neo. I still hold all my Vader, right? Like, Vader is, I think, a slept on play because he's always pivoting to ahead of the curve. And now he's basically gathering video data that they can feed to bots so that they can learn. He's actually working with a company in China. So I think this trend is massive. And I think, was it Jensen Huang from NVIDIA basically said something that it is a, trillions of dollars as in terms of an opportunity when it comes to robotics. So I think owning some Tesla is not financial advice and all, but a very smart and safe play at this point, right? Because it's shown that it has continued market dominance. not only for the vehicles, which continue to do well, but I mean, imagine when he starts rolling out Optimus at scale. And to rewind time a little bit to 10 years ago or more, when the Teslas first started rolling out, that was the thing that constantly they pounded Elon with. Oh, you'll never be able to do this at scale. You'll never be able to produce these vehicles in such a way that you can actually make money. They constantly were badgering Tesla, and it was constantly being shorted. And now they're going to say the same thing with, oh, you'll never be able to produce these Optimus robots. I guarantee, do not bet against this guy. Like, he will find a way to produce these things at scale, to drive down the cost, and then people will see these Tesla bots everywhere, and it's only going to be a good thing for the share price.
I like that. I like the take. And also, there's just not that many publicly traded companies that are heavily focused on robotics that you can invest in.
Yeah.
Look at something like Boston Dynamics. Boston Dynamics is not a public company. Actually, it was Hyundai, the car maker, who in 2021 acquired an 80% share in Boston Dynamics. And Hyundai is up 40% over the last 6 months. Let me double check 39% over the last 6 months. So their main thing is not Boston Dynamics. They're still primarily a car maker, but they have this obviously significant 80% stake in Boston Dynamics, and the market is liking that a lot. Given that we're already talking about robotics, I think that's the perfect segue into the second headline, which is to do with AI. And it's to do with OpenAI specifically eyeing $1 trillion IPO amid a global AI, and I would also go further to say robotics arms race. And the interesting thing here is, once again, that both those sectors, which obviously are like highly, highly interwoven, both of them need NVIDIA, right? So if anything, NVIDIA then is also becoming a bet on robotics as well, and on AI as well. So probably one of the main reasons why it managed to smash through that $5 trillion market cap valuation. But some more details, which we've learned on that OpenAI IPO. So it is preparing an initial public offering for late 2026. We could see the world's largest startup reach $1 trillion valuation there. As we said, that would include a $60 billion capital raise. That is according to 3 anonymous sources familiar with the matter, which was reported by Reuters on Thursday. The filing may reach US security regulators in the second half of 2026. So it would put them ahead if they manage to IPO in late 2026 of their initial target to IPO in 2027. However, a spokesperson for OpenAI said that there is no set date for the IPO. Their focus is still obviously the development of an AGI. And I think the interesting part, or the other interesting part from that article, which is coming via TradingView, is that they have also been looking as a part of that at a trading leaderboard where you have DeepSeek, a Grok, Claude, a Gemini, and GPT trading and crypto specifically. And it was only DeepSeek who was able to achieve a positive return there. Again, all those LLMs are not necessarily trading bots, so it's maybe missing the mark a bit to just dumb them down and say, oh, DeepSeek is better because it managed to generate some return in crypto. Just wanted to bring it to your guys' attention because I thought it's interesting that now TradingView is looking at LLMs and how they're doing trading crypto. Generally a good sign for our industry, but obviously the significant part, the main part of the news is that they are eyeing for $1 trillion IPO. Phunky, coming to you for your reflections on that.
I mean, that's insane, right? I mean, in terms of evaluation, to have a market publicly debut at $1 trillion, or a company, I should say, seems outlandish to me. In today's world of constant debasement and devaluing of the dollar, is it possible? Sure. Yeah. Like, no one's going to deny that. I think people would also agree that ChatGPT and OpenAI is sort of the market leader in terms of just like when people think of using AI. Personally, I've been using it less and less. I still have like the $20 a month subscription. But for the time being, just because of little things where I always have to kind of correct it and whatnot, I find myself using Grok more as my daily driver, and it's effectively the same thing for free. And I don't know if they'll keep it for free. I mean, maybe as a premium plus subscription member, hopefully at that price, you get to have access to Grok for free. But, you know, I think that the bigger challenge is that, and this kind of dovetails nicely with something that they talked about in that incentive layer documentary about Bittensor, is that, you know, when you think about ChatGPT, it is closed source, right? Like OpenAI, what they're doing is keeping all of the stuff proprietary to themselves. And, you know, the article kind of alluded to this. If DeepSeek was trained for 5.7 or 3 million versus 5.7 billion, like think about the monetary inputs that OpenAI has already received. And it's not getting, I mean, it gotten better, don't get me wrong. Like from where we were just even say a year and a half ago, it's considerably better. But one starts to wonder the amount of money that's being poured into it. Is it really worth like the iterative advances that it's been making? And because it is closed source, you don't have like in the documentary, they talk about when you do something open source, everybody can help, right? Like people can just iterate on the code and make it better. And this is why I think Meta, despite, and people thought it was going to destroy Meta's value, was that they open sourced Llama, which is their LLM, right? So like you see these different visions for how to architect and construct various LLMs and the economic value that it brings to these companies. I mean, Meta's not even worth that, right? When you talk about, and Meta owns Facebook. So I don't know, like it just seems like a hype. Seems like a lot of hype in terms of just like, oh, it's OpenAI and it's going to be the thing for AI. But I just feel like there's so much competition in the space. I just don't know how it could maintain that value.
So yeah, the question typically would be, do you see an upside if something is launching at $1 trillion?
I wouldn't, I mean, even if I were an accredited investor who was offered it, maybe like, and depending on what the valuation is that it's offered, but like me just open, like, would I pull a coin trade? I mean, a circle trade like you did? No, not in a million years. Like, would I try and jump on the launch? Because if it's going to be at $1 trillion, I mean, to your point, like, what is the upside there? It's not like it's going to suddenly double, right? Like, I mean, that would then put it on the footing with some of the top probably 10 companies on the planet, and it hasn't really, you know, shown that it's generating that kind of revenue. I mean, we will only get to see sort of the peak into the books once it becomes like an IPO publicly traded company anyhow. So it's not like you're going to have access to that information for how much money it's bringing in. What's their burn rate look like? You know, I mean, obviously we know they're pouring billions of dollars into improving it, but I mean, can you sustain that and then grow the value from there? I don't know. It's a tough call.
I'll take, you know, for the sake of discussion, I'll take the other side of this, and I'll say you're not betting on the revenue specifically. You're betting on them being the first company to achieve AGI status, and if you think that they have simply just the budget to do that, because this is going to be an expensive, very expensive achievement to make. The first company to achieve AGI is most likely the one to have won that arms race, essentially, because then you can essentially put an infinite amount of resources into that model and no one else is going to be able to catch up to you. An analogy that some people have used to explain this is kind of like if you and I, Phunky, were racing to, you know, achieve the speed of light and you hit it a minute before me, I'm never going to catch up to you because like this is the maximum speed that, you know, in our understanding of physics, we can go at. And obviously that would be so fundamental for the entire society to have an AGI model that is literally changing the foundation of economics, society, us living together on this planet. So maybe it's more a bet on that than necessarily on the revenue side of things. Now, do I think that OpenAI is going to be the company to achieve an AGI model? No idea. Absolutely not competent to make this this analysis. The only thing I'll say is that very famous dev who had left OpenAI said, not about OpenAI specifically, but generally about advancements in the AI sector, is that we'll hit AGI status way sooner than most people expect for a couple of reasons. models becoming better, just more money getting put into that, and eventually finding a way to scale their potential and power beyond just assigning more compute to them. And they're thinking that it's not unlikely to see AGI before 2030. Again, absolutely no position to say if this is an accurate call or not. There's maybe like 3 or 5 people in the world who have such a deep understanding to be able to comment on that in a qualified way. So I can just report from what I have read, what others have said on that. But
no, I think you're spot on, and I think that it might be even sooner, right? Again, I'm in your camp. I don't have the wherewithal or the expertise to make such a judgment call. But the thing that haunts me the most is Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, saying that ASI, which is the one above AGI, would be achieved within 6 years at the current rate. If you extrapolate sort of where we are with just LLMs and how they're growing and everything else. So like, I think, to your point, and I didn't think about that, like that's a great analogy with the whole speed of light thing, that the first one to get to AGI is really going to kind of crack something open that, the rest of the world. And if they do that in a closed source way, that's really leans into your point, right? Like I'd much rather see that happen in an open source way, so that way other models can continue to build off of that, right? Without having to, be fettered by that sort of proprietary kind of modeling that, if it were to AGI were achieved through that instead first. But either which way, exciting days ahead, right? I mean, I often say to my wife, I can't imagine what life is going to look like in 10 years. I mean, so yeah, it's just very different place.
Yeah, nobody can. Humans are generally very horrible at predicting the future. Look, we got 3 minutes left in the show. We need to cover the Mega headline. I'm going to keep that short because we've been talking about Mega for the entire week. Quick one here. Oversubscription reached actually 1.3 billion, up another 100 mil since B had posted the snapshot. Means it's oversubscribed by 26x. And a Swizzy, a good friend of ours, good friend of the show, took the time to do some math on that, because we know there's a minimum allocation of $2,650, as well as a max allo of 186K. They said that like roughly 5K are going to get them in allo. Then around 100 people was kind of the like thinking assumption we'll get max allo. Swizzy went with 75 people. That leaves room for, in his estimation, around 2 to 3K more wallets to actually receive any kind of allocation. So his takeaway there is currently 40K wallets contributed. Say there's going to be 42K at the end. Roughly 7K will get an allo. Again, that is him speculating and doing reasonable assumptions. 35K won't get an allo. So if you don't get a min allo and you don't get a max allo, then the expectation here would be to get 31% of what you deposited, expecting a 69% cut. Not official numbers, once more, to say that it is Swizzy doing some reasonable assumptions, but I did want to share that with y'all. And with that being said, Phunky, quickly checking in with you. Any final thoughts on that, or shall we move on to spinning the wheel?
I love it when you say y'all. Let's spin that wheel.
Let's spin that wheel indeed. As we said, we are partnered with Beezie. Beezie did introduce a new claw, $250 gold claw, new animation, beautiful animation that is, that has Pokemon slabs in it. Yesterday, there was like a 3 and a 4K card that got pulled. Top pull now is this Golem 2.6K card in PSA 10, Japanese first edition from Split Earth, and some pretty beautiful cards in there. And we have one of these $250 to give away, or a pull for this gold claw to give away. And the way we're going to do that is I took the top 3 people who were using or who are using the Modern Market referral for Beezie, which I'm going to post in the comments to the show, as I will close out the show in a bit too. Because we have some more, we still have OpenSea claws and stuff to give away, so definitely worth signing up and getting some pulls in. And the top 3, which in this case is Meg, is Noble, and is Holo Hoarder 486758. did some volume weighting here. So it's basically a very Meg and Noble dominated wheel, which we're going to spin for this $250 voucher right now. Let's see who the winner is. Wheel is slowing down and it's looking like it's moving over from Meg to Noble. Yes, indeed. Congrats. I'm going to reach out to you on Telegram. Make sure to get that voucher to you. And with that being said, that's it. That's the show for today. Thank you so much, Phunky, for joining me as a co-host today. Thank you, Oxy, for your contributions on stage. Thank you to everyone in the audience listening in. We appreciate you. We will, as usual, upload the show to Spotify, to Apple Music. I'm going to have clips coming out, and we're going to be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 a.m. Eastern time. With that being said, have a good Thursday and see you tomorrow.
Take care, gang.